Hello beautiful people of the internet, how are you doing today? My name is Jackie and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I am posting a Gone with the Wind book review. I read this massive book for a read-along hosted by Tori from Hufflepuff Discovery, and the book, I was supposed to read it in 2 months. It ended up taking me closer to 4 months. This was an interesting book, but a difficult one to get through for many reasons, and that's why I wanted to make an entire review video about this book, because I personally feel like it is impossible to describe all the conflicting feelings this book made me feel in a succinct fashion. I think if I just tried to describe what reading this book was like in a wrap-up video, it would be impossible to get my many emotions across. This book is a Pulitzer Prize winner, and you might also know the story from the very famous film starring Vivien Leigh and Clark Gable. The main character in this book is Scarlett O'Hara. She is a teenager when we first meet her, living in Georgia shortly before the start of the American Civil War. Scarlett is a legendary anti-hero and a really fascinating character. We follow her throughout years of her life, several romantic relationships, though the most interesting part of this book for me was her relationship with Rhett Butler. Rhett Butler is older than Scarlett and a man of mystery. Now, usually when I review a book on this channel, it's very easy for me to tell you whether I liked the book or hated it. In the case of Gone with the Wind, it's a very difficult book to even say whether I liked it or not. On Goodreads, I gave it 3 stars because there were parts of the plot that I found really interesting, and I think the 2 main characters are amazingly written characters. However, this book has so many problematic aspects, racism among others, and also on a less serious note, there were just huge sections of the book that I felt really dragged. That's why I titled this review The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, because I feel like that's just a perfect way to describe my feelings about this book. There were good things, there were bad things, and there were ugly things that in my particular opinion make the good things a little harder to appreciate. I knew pretty early on in this book that it was definitely, no matter what, not getting 5 stars from me, because when I give a book 5 stars, it's one that I absolutely love, and it's impossible for me to separate my feelings from this book from its problematic components. But this book takes place during the Civil War and in the post-Civil War era Deep South. And the depiction of race and slavery in this book is extremely sanitized and historically inaccurate because this book does not acknowledge the harm that slavery caused. All of the Black characters in this book are one-dimensional at best. Every Black character in this book falls into one of 3 groups. Either they're lazy, violent, or if they actually are hardworking and intelligent, then they are totally fine being slaves and see nothing wrong with it. Obviously, I would hope everyone watching this video understands that slavery is wrong, because when you are enslaving a person, you are depriving them of their basic human rights and treating them like property, not as a human being. This book absolutely 100% sweeps the horrors of slavery under the rug and offers a depiction of the pre-Civil War South that is glamorized and just based in falsehoods. And I will also say that this is not the case of a book that presents a racist viewpoint for the reader to criticize. Sometimes when I see people discuss classic novels, they label a book as racist when if you actually read the book and think about it, the character saying racist things is someone the text wants you to disagree with, and they want you to question that viewpoint and recognize that it is harmful. This book, however, does not do that because all of these racist talking points are not questioned in the narrative. There is no critical thinking about these things. The author genuinely believes these things to be true. This book does have other ugly components, though to a lesser extent. There is a good deal of classism in the text where the wealthy planter class are depicted as very intelligent, good, and sophisticated, and then we also have the poorer people in those communities who are multiple times in the text referred to as white trash, and these people are depicted as being intellectually and morally inferior. Throughout history, we've seen people in power accuse the poor of being lazy and or morally bankrupt, and basically saying that the reason they're impoverished is due to some sort of failing on their part. However, this narrative is not actually true, and really it's institutional barriers that keep certain people poor, not due to any innate fault of their own most of the time. However, this viewpoint is somewhat questioned in the text, unlike the racism was, because we do meet a character named Will in this book who comes from a poor background, and Scarlett, the main character, acknowledges that before the war, Will, due to his humble origins, is not someone her family ever would have associated with due to their differing class statuses. However, when they end up meeting after the war, Will ends up becoming an integral part of the O'Hara family and someone that Scarlett actually deeply values for his friendship and hardworking nature. So we do see a bit of that classism challenged through the character of Will, but there is still a lot of stereotyping of the poor throughout the book. And the final thing that I wanted to discuss in this ugly section of the review is this book does have a scene that we nowadays would classify as non-consensual. I do not think that was Mitchell's intention when she was writing this scene, as at the time this book was written, there was not the same understanding of consent, and legally, marital rape was not a thing. Legally, it was at this time impossible for a man to rape his wife, because if you were married to a man and he wanted sex, you were obligated to give it. You did not have the same right to consent. So I believe that she intended for this scene to be a romantic, amorous encounter. I do not have the text of the book in front of me, and I was listening to this scene on audiobook, so forgive me if I'm getting it wrong. However, I think she meant for this to be a totally consensual moment and a positive point in the characters' relationships. However, as a modern day feminist with a more sophisticated understanding of consent, I do not think proper consent was achieved in this scene, because if the person doesn't give an enthusiastic yes, then there is not consent. I could not give this book a higher rating due to these offensive beliefs it espouses. Honestly, I could have talked about all these issues more in depth. You could probably write an entire thesis on any of these topics, and there are many well-written articles on the internet discussing these components of the book in more depth. I'm just discussing them briefly because this is just one review video and I cannot write an entire thesis. But I did feel it was important to touch on all these serious topics briefly because they are a part of the work that I cannot look past, and they did color my opinion of the book as a whole. I will say I can understand why this book was so popular at the time of its publication, because I think the two main characters of Scarlett and Rhett are both extremely fascinating. I do not think either of them are good people. They're not the kind of people that I would want to be friends with or be in a relationship with. However, they are good characters because they have such complex personalities and feel fully realized. There is so much going on with both of their psyches. Scarlett is the main character of this book, however, I would not describe her as a heroine, more like an anti-heroine, because she has many, many negative traits. She is one of the most self-centered characters you will probably ever come across. And she is very good at manipulating people and situations to achieve her own ends. She does not think about the morality or lack thereof in her actions all that often, and when she does, she usually is more worried about the state of her own soul rather than how her actions could negatively impact the people she's supposed to care about. Scarlett is absolutely ruthless in pursuit of her ambitions. However, I do feel like she also has some positive qualities that I did genuinely admire in her, and that's why I think she's such a fascinating main character to follow. She has good qualities and many, many bad qualities. In this period after the Civil War where she is struggling to get her life together once again, I think it was admirable how she was able to summon her inner strength. I feel like she is very good at compartmentalizing, where she's able to focus on what needs to be done to survive today and then leave her grief and other upsetting emotions to deal with another time. If I found myself in a similar situation where my home has been ravaged by war and a lot of the people that I loved were no longer alive, I don't know if I would be able to summon that same inner strength and do what needs to be done to see tomorrow. I guess it's impossible to know for sure until you are in that situation, but I do think her tenacity was an admirable quality. There is definitely an inner fire and inner drive in her that I think makes her a compelling main character to follow, even if she's someone I would not want to be my friend in real life. Then we have Rhett Butler. I think Rhett Butler was my favorite character in this entire book, and even after reading almost 1,000 pages of this book, I am still not entirely sure I understand him. He is definitely a man of mystery. Throughout this book, we are mainly following Scarlett's perspective, though occasionally we will get a couple paragraphs or a full chapter from the perspective of another character. However, I do not believe there is a single point throughout this book where we, the reader, have access to Rhett's thoughts, and I would have loved just a little bit of this book from his perspective, because a lot of the times while I was reading, I found myself wondering what it is that he was thinking. I think he, as a character, presents this certain persona to the world. However, I'm not entirely convinced that outward persona always matches what he's actually feeling inside. One of the characteristics of Rhett that I appreciate is I think he is the most self-aware character in this entire book. Throughout this book, we have a lot of characters who are deluded. They think they're good people when they're actually not. They think the South is going to win the war when they actually have no chance. Even Scarlett herself is kidding herself at times because she wants to be a respectable, proper Southern lady, but she's really not. She really is selfish and not the way that women in the society are supposed to be. She presents a veneer to the world, but Rhett actually knows what she's really like. This world that the main characters of this book inhabit is, for lack of a better word, often fake. People say things in the name of politeness that they don't actually mean. They will smile to your face and then talk about how much they hate you behind your back. So what I appreciated about Rhett was how straightforward he is. He is brutally honest and he says things that may be true, but the other people in this world don't want to hear. So at times he is very popular in society when his wealth and influence can be used to others' benefit, and then other times he holds up a mirror to these people around him and they can't stand it. Rhett's persona is that of a charming rogue type. He is suave, a bit of an ass, but still charming, and his past is filled with question marks. He was a professional gambler, he's a bit of a womanizer, and there are a lot of unanswered questions from his personal history. He presents himself as someone who really does not care about anything but advancing himself and making money. However, we also see that he is capable of genuine acts of generosity towards people that he does think highly of. And though he acts like he doesn't care what anyone thinks, I got the impression that deep down, he does care a little bit. Towards the end of the novel, there are some moments where we glimpse genuine emotion and feeling from him. I think he, as a character, to a certain extent, is scared to be emotionally vulnerable. So while he is hopelessly in love with Scarlett, he is not able to articulate those feelings, and she spends a lot of the book thinking he doesn't love her when he actually does. I think there is a part of him that is scared to be hurt, though he won't admit that out loud. Towards the end of the book, we see some absolutely devastating moments from him that convey a depth of feeling I think he is sometimes scared to show to the world. I also found the relationship between Scarlett and Rhett totally compelling. Now, listen, if the two of them were real life people and I was a relationship therapist and they came into my office and talked to me about their relationship, I think I would probably think to myself, got my work cut out for me here. I don't know if I would describe their relationship as healthy at times. I think they are so similar that it is a bit of a gasoline meet match situation. But when you're reading a book, I think their dynamic is really compelling, even if it wouldn't make for the healthiest real-world relationship. There's something about it that I really enjoyed. The two of them are very similar people with similar ambitions and temperaments, and the scenes between the two of them were my favorite scenes in the entire book. They have an amazing rapport between them that was really enjoyable to read. And like I referenced earlier, a majority of the people in Scarlett's life don't know what's going on in her mind, and they have impressions of her that we, the reader, know are not accurate. So another thing about the Rhett-Scarlett relationship that I found fascinating is he is the one person who I think knows what she truly is and knows how she is feeling inside. There is a point in the text where she acknowledges how much she enjoys talking to him and how she feels like she can be honest with him in a way she can't be with other people. So to me, I found it really compelling that he knows all of her character flaws, all of her selfishness, all of her negative qualities, and he loves her anyway. He loves her for this complicated and not always likable person that she is. He's the only person in this book who truly sees her. The last 25% of this book or so was my absolute favorite. I thought that section of the book was so enjoyable to read, and it was predominantly due to the way these two characters play off each other. This last 25% of the book was so exciting, and there were several moments that made me feel genuine emotion. There were parts that made me really sad and touched me deeply. The ending is also extremely tragic. Another negative, in my opinion, however, is that I thought the middle section of this book was incredibly boring. I think part of the reason why it took me 4 months to read this book is because there was a huge chunk in the middle where I was just waiting for something else to happen. Probably because for a significant portion of the middle of the book, Rhett's not there. And like I said, he was my favorite character, and the scenes between him and Scarlett were my favorite parts. I think there are some books that are really long, but they don't feel long. This book is a really long book that feels really long, in my opinion. There were parts that really dragged, and so that also lowered my overall rating. I think the characters of Rhett and Scarlett are what made this book special and what made it so famous in the first place. Another positive I will mention is I do think Mitchell as a writer was really great at describing characters, scenery, and details. There was a real authenticity to her descriptions, and I think she was very good at describing the quiet details about a character, showing you little aspects of their personality in ways that I wouldn't have thought of. She can tell you so much about a person from the way they move their hands or the way they curl their lip. At the beginning of the book, I felt like the description of Scarlett's mother in particular was a truly amazing character description. The way that she was described, she had this almost ethereal quality, and I think that was very fitting because we see that Scarlett idolizes her mother in a way, and so I think the way the character was described, that definitely came across. There are so many vivid details in the writing of this book, from the lace on a dress, to the sun setting over the trees, to the way the fields blow in the wind. There were several lines that really struck me as being beautifully described. Ultimately, would I recommend this book to you or not? The answer is yes and no. I would describe this as an interesting book to read, but not a fun one. It was one that gave me a lot to think about, but it was very difficult to get through at times. This is a book that I think is great if you want to study it and discuss it with others. However, if you're looking for a book just to read for fun, I don't think this is the book for you. This is a book that you really have to dive into, discuss, and think critically about. If that's something that you're willing to invest time in, then maybe this is a book that you want to read. Personally, I don't regret reading this book because I did find the characters really interesting. However, I do not think I will ever read it again. I think once was enough. This book took a lot of time and energy, and at times I found reading it a bit draining. I will probably watch the movie. I've actually only ever seen little bits of it, so someday I think I will watch that, but I'm never gonna read this book again. So that is it for my Gone with the Wind book review. Have you read this book? If so, let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Were there any aspects of the book that I forgot to discuss in this video you would like to talk about? Again, just drop me a comment. Please like this video if you enjoyed, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me. I post new videos every single Wednesday and Sunday. My social media links are down below if you want to follow me on Tumblr, Instagram, or be my friend on Goodreads. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a marvelous rest of your day. Bye, and I'll see you next time.